Welcome to the Silverwood Saga podcast. Follow the story at silverwoodsaga.com. Now it's time to step back into the forest. The town's last lanterns vanish behind them as they step into the woods. The tavern's noise fades, replaced by rustling leaves and the low hoot of an unseen owl. Moonlight filters through the canopy, casting silver beams that shift and shimmer across the path. Silra glides ahead, her steps light and silent. Behind her, Jay's boots crunch over fallen leaves, loud in the hush of the forest. She glances over at Jay, a wry smile playing on her lips, though there's a glint of concern behind it. "You know," she says, her tone light, almost teasing. "I didn't expect you to follow so quickly. Most would think twice before charging into the unknown without so much as a second thought." Her gaze shifts ahead, scanning the shadowy woods. With a hint of mischief, she says, "But I guess that's what makes this interesting." Her voice drops to a whisper. "Just stay close, we're nearing the ruins." She slows her pace. As the warmth of the beer fades, Jay feels a knot of unease tightening in his chest, the reality of their situation settling in with the chill of the night. He glances sideways at Silra, trying to keep his voice light, even as his nerves start to show. "You know, as far as first dates go, this is definitely unique. So, you're not planning to feed me to some giant spider, are you?" Silra glances back at Jay. A teasing smile creeps across her lips, clearly amused. "So, this is what you consider a first date?" she says, her tone light, eyebrows raised in mock surprise. "Well, I'll do my best not to feed you to any giant spiders. Wouldn't want to ruin the romance." She steps closer, her voice dropping to a playful whisper, her breath misting in the cool night air. "Though I can't make any promises if you tread on my toes again." With a wink and a smile, she gestures for him to follow, turning back toward the depths of the forest. Her movements are smooth and confident, leading the way through the shadows as the trees seem to close in around them. Jay pauses for a moment, struck by the sight of Silra framed in the silvery glow of the moonlight. Her features are softened by the shadows, her cloak flowing around her, and for a heartbeat he forgets the cold and the uncertainty. Women like her, confident, beautiful, and mysterious, never usually stop to talk to him. Most of the time he's just a shadow on the edge of their busy lives, sweeping the streets while they hurry by, heads held high, calling out, "Make way," without a second glance. A thought flits through his mind, half joking, half serious. Did the beer and her beauty make him lose his senses? He remembers stories his friends have told, tales of men lured away by enchanting succubi, drawn into the night by a smile, never to be seen again. He swallows hard, casting a glance back down the path they came. The way back is dark, the tavern's lights swallowed by the dense shadows of the forest, and it looks far more uninviting than before. But when he looks back at Silra, there's a warmth in her smile that pulls him forward. It's like a small ember glowing in the cold, promising comfort, and a touch of safety in the midst of the unknown. He takes a deep breath, and without quite knowing why, he makes his decision. With a determined nod, he steps forward, closing the distance between them, following her deeper into the night. The forest, though, is unforgiving, and Jay's footsteps are clumsy on the uneven ground. He stumbles over roots and brushes against low branches, his feet scuffing against the thick undergrowth. Every so often he bumps into Silra's back or shoulder. "Sorry, I can't see a thing," he whispers quickly. She doesn't seem to mind each time. She glances back with a soft, amused smirk. "You're doing fine, Jay," she says quietly, her voice carrying a warmth that surprises him. Jay can't help but wonder if his friends had been right about the risks of following someone so mysterious, so alluring. But as she looks at him, her eyes catching a faint glow from the moonlight filtering through the trees, he finds something genuine in her gaze that puts him at ease. She stops as he stumbles over a thick root, then turns to face him. Her hand shoots out, steadying him with a light touch before he can trip again. "You're nervous," she says, her tone gentle and without judgment. "This isn't exactly what you imagined when you offered to buy that drink, is it?" Jay feels the truth of her words settle in his chest, and he manages a sheepish smile, rubbing the back of his neck with his free hand. "I mean, honestly, I thought it was going to be a walk in the park." She offers him a small, sincere smile, one that seems to cut through the shadows. "Stay close, all right? And if you fall again, I promise I'll catch you before the spiders do." With a playful wink, she releases his arm and turns, leading them deeper into the forest. Jay grins sheepishly and keeps following close behind, making an earnest effort to move quietly but failing spectacularly. Every few steps, a twig cracks loudly beneath his boots, or leaves crunch beneath his feet, announcing their presence to the entire forest. Silra glances back each time one of his missteps echoes through the night, a small amused smile playing at the corners of her lips. "You're really making sure everything out here knows we're coming, aren't you?" she teases, her voice barely rising above the whisper of the wind in the trees. Jay shrugs. "I think that's a real possibility." Despite her teasing, she slows her pace just enough to let Jay keep closer, her movements effortless in contrast to his noisy fumbling. The deeper they go, the colder the night becomes, the cool air biting at their skin. Around them, the sounds of the forest grow more muted. In a hushed voice, Silra whispers, "We're close now. The ruins are just up ahead." As they approach a small clearing, the ruins come into view. Ancient stones half swallowed by creeping vines and moss, their edges softened by centuries of neglect. Silra pauses at the edge of the clearing, her sharp gaze scanning the shadows between the crumbling structures. Her hand drifts instinctively to the hilt of the dagger at her side, her body tense and alert. "This is it," she murmurs, her voice barely more than a breath. "Are you ready for whatever surprises might be waiting in there, Jay? This is where things get interesting." With barely a moment's hesitation, Jay nods, oblivious to the tension in her voice, and strides forward, his enthusiasm carrying him toward the ruins without a second thought. "Let's go," he says with a grin, moving ahead without waiting for further instructions. Silra's eyes widen slightly as she watches him move forward with almost reckless eagerness. Her mouth opens as if to caution him, but she quickly closes it, a bemused smile tugging at her lips. She shakes her head, releasing a soft sigh, her amusement mingling with exasperation. She follows him with a few graceful strides, catching up to his side just as they near the looming, crumbling structures. The moonlight casts long shadows over the ancient carvings etched into the stones, their shapes barely visible under layers of tangled greenery and decay. "Wait!" Silra reaches out, her fingers lightly gripping Jay's arm, her voice a firm but quiet whisper. "Be careful, Jay. This place has been abandoned for centuries, but that doesn't mean it's safe." Her eyes sweep the clearing, and Jay notices how her body tenses, as if she senses something just beyond the edge of his perception. These ruins aren't just old stone. There's magic here, or maybe something worse. Her tone carries a weight that presses down on the air around them. She releases his arm, her gaze softening briefly with a touch of concern. "Look, I know you're brave, or maybe just oblivious," she says with a smirk that almost hides the edge of genuine worry beneath. "But trust me, Stay close. If anything goes wrong, just follow my lead. Don't wander off. Silra moves with a purpose, her steps steady but careful, leading the way into the heart of the ruins. Jay tries to break the tension with a nervous joke, forcing a grin. Last time you led, we ended up in a heap on the floor. Best pile I've ever been a part of, though. He catches himself, cringing at his own rambling. I'm gibbering, sorry, you lead. Silra pauses mid-step, her back to him, and then a soft, genuine laugh slips out unexpectedly in the tense, shadowed forest. She turns, her eyebrow arched, a teasing smile playing on her lips. Well, at least you've got a sense of humour, she says, her tone light, cutting through the darkness around them. But don't worry, I'll try to keep us on our feet this time. She steps closer, resting a hand briefly on Jay's shoulder, a small but steadying gesture. Her touch lingers just long enough to calm some of his jitters, and she meets his eyes with a reassuring smile before turning back to the path ahead. She resumes her careful movements, leading them deeper into the heart of the ruins, each step graceful and deliberate. Jay follows closely, the ancient stones looming around them, their surfaces etched with carvings that cast long shadows in the moonlight. With every step, the air grows thicker, buzzing faintly with something that makes Jay's skin prickle. It's impossible to tell whether it's magic, danger, or something else entirely, but the weight of it presses down on his chest. Despite his unease, Silra's steady confidence keeps him moving forward, her hand never far from the dagger at her side. As they reach what seems to be the entrance to a central chamber, she pauses, glancing back at Jay with a playful glint in her eyes. Still with me? Jay nervously nods. Yeah, I'm here. Let's hope we don't end up in another heap, though I have to admit, I've had worse company. She winks, her voice dropping to a low murmur as she steps inside, the shadows swallowing her silhouette. Stay close, we're not alone here. Jay nods quickly, his voice steady but quiet as he says, right behind you, then pauses. Not alone? What do you mean, not alone? Silra? He hurries after her as she leads them deeper into the heart of the central chamber. The air grows cooler with each step, and a strange, ancient energy seems to hum through the walls. Jay's footsteps echo softly, bouncing off the stone. The chamber itself is vast, its cracked pillars reaching skyward like skeletal fingers, with thick, tangled vines cascading down from above, forming a dark, leafy curtain. Faint inscriptions cover the walls, their lines worn and faded by time, and the meaning of their ancient symbols remains a mystery. Moonlight barely reaches this far, casting just enough light to create deep, shifting shadows that seem to breathe as the two of them move through the space. Despite Jay's best efforts to tread lightly, loose stones crunch underfoot, betraying his presence with each step. Silra halts near the centre of the chamber, her eyes narrowing as she surveys the gloom. Her hand hovers near the hilt of her dagger, her entire body coiled with tension, ready to spring into action. There, she whispers, her voice barely a breath as she gestures toward the far end of the room. Jay follows her gaze and sees a dark figure, more shadow than substance, gliding between the ancient stone. It moves with a silent, fluid grace, its form blurring at the edges as if it's part of the darkness itself. A chill races down Jay's spine. Silra, what the hell is that? Stay low, Silra murmurs, her command sharp and precise. She crouches, beckoning for Jay to do the same. The shadowy figure shifts in the distance, its movements unnatural, like mist drifting through the ruins. Silra! Jay whispers, panic rising in his voice. Silra glances back at Jay, her eyes reflecting a blend of determination and concern. That thing isn't going to be easy to handle. She manages a small, reassuring smile, but there's a flicker of doubt in her eyes that she can't quite hide. You've made it this far. Just stay close, and no matter what happens, don't run. With a final nod, she begins to move forward, each step slow and deliberate, her attention never wavering from the shadowy figure ahead. The air feels charged, crackling with the tension of what's to come, and the ancient ruins seem to watch in silence as they close in on the darkness that waits for them. "Fuck, fuck, fuck," Jay mutters, then notices Silra's hand resting on the hilt of her dagger. Jay instinctively reaches into his coat and pulls out the cutlery knife he'd swiped from the tavern earlier. He glances down at the dull blade, then back at the gleaming weapon she carries, its edge sharp and ready. With a resigned shrug, he shakes his head. Better than nothing, I guess, holding it up as if to convince himself. Silra glances over her shoulder and notices the cutlery knife in his hand. For a moment, her lips twitch as she quickly bites a laugh, her eyes dancing with amusement. "Well, it's something," she whispers desperately, trying not to laugh, her voice barely audible in the stillness of the chamber. "Just don't try to butter anyone to death, all right?" She gives Jay a small wink before turning her attention back to the shadowy figure ahead. The creature, or whatever it is, moves in an almost fluid manner, its form constantly shifting as if it's more a part of the darkness than a solid being. Silra motions for Jay to stay close, her movements cautious but purposeful as she inches forward. As the two creep toward the figure, the air grows colder, and the strange hum that fills the ruins grows louder, almost like a faint, unearthly chant. Silra's grip tightens on her dagger, and without turning her head, she whispers, "Whatever happens, stay calm. These things feed on fear. The less you show, the better chance we have." Jay swallows hard, clutching the cutlery knife like it's his lifeline, feeling his pulse quicken. As he closes the distance between him and the figure, he notices something strange. There's a faint glow near the base, one of the pillars, a flickering blue light like the remnants of a firefly caught in the dark. Silra stops abruptly, crouching behind a crumbling pillar, and gestures for Jay to follow her lead. "There," she whispers, nodding toward a faint glowing light in the distance. "That's what we're after, if we can reach it." Her eyes dart to the cutlery knife clutched in Jay's hand, and for a moment a genuine smile breaks through the tension. "Think you're ready for this, Jay?" she asks, her voice a mix of seriousness and wry humour. "Even with that butter knife, I'd say we've got a fighting chance." "Feeds on fear, don't be scared," Jay mutters to himself, absolutely terrified but trying to mask it. "You need that shiny thing, right, okay?" Jay gets up, "Fuck it," and starts walking to the shining light. As he steps out from behind the pillar, his heart pounding and every instinct screaming at him to turn back, Silra's eyes widen in shock as she watches Jay approach the shadowy figure. She opens her mouth to stop him but quickly closes it, realizing an opportunity. The shadow figure turns its faceless form toward Jay, a strange, unnatural stillness falling over the room. For a moment the eerie hum in the air seems to pause, as if the creature itself is considering Jay's bold, if somewhat ridiculous, approach. "Hello, sir," Jay says, his voice wavering slightly but still carrying a forced air of casualness. "How are you this evening? I'm just passing through, got a bit turned around on a night out." The creature stands silent. For a moment it seems like it might respond. The flickering light pulses, brighter now as if it senses Jay and Silra nearby. It steps forward, its shifting form flowing like ink in water. Pressure builds in Jay's mind, heavy and invasive. Fear claws at the edges of his composure, but he forces himself upright, knuckles white around the cutlery knife. The figure's movements slow, as if it's confused by Jay's calm demeanour, perhaps thrown off by his complete lack of fear. Silra moves silently through the shadows alongside Jay, watching intently, her eyes flicking between him and the glowing light. Silra whispers, "Keep going, Jay. Just a little closer," she urges. Jay takes another step toward the glowing light, his pulse pounding in his ears. The shadowy creature shifts, its form twitching as if uncertain, its entire focus now locked on him. "You know," Jay says, his voice growing a bit steadier with each word, "this isn't exactly what I had in mind for a night out, but I'll admit, the atmosphere is unique." He edges closer, the flickering light just a few steps away. The shadowy figure looms, but it holds back, uncertain, as if Jay's newfound confidence has thrown it off balance. "Well, I've got places to be," Jay says as nonchalantly as he can, extending a hand toward the glowing light. "So, if you don't mind..." In that instant, Silra slips from her hiding spot, her movements silent and precise. She appears at his side, a flash of elven grace in the dimness, her hand reaching out to touch the light. As her fingers connect with it, the glow flares brighter, and a pulse of searing energy radiates outward, filling the chamber with a blinding brilliance. Suddenly a jet of flame bursts from Silra's hand, striking the shadow with a hiss. Its form ripples, warping as if thrown into turmoil. With a shriek, it darts across the floor and vanishes from the chamber, its scream trailing into the cold. Jay staggers slightly, his mouth open, stunned, the afterglow of the light still dancing across his vision. Silra stands beside him, panting softly, her wide eyes reflecting a mix of surprise and a new, undeniable admiration. You actually did it," she says, her voice catching with disbelief before a wide grin breaks across her face. "Jay, you just distracted a shadow with small talk." She shakes her head, a soft laugh bubbling up as she steps closer, still trying to steady her breathing. "I think I owe you a drink after that one." Her smile lingers, genuine and warm. Jay, still processing what happened, stares at her wide-eyed. "You came out of nowhere, and then the light, and then there was fire," he says, catching his breath. Silra, still grinning from ear to ear, lets out a genuine laugh at Jay's reaction, clearly enjoying the surprise etched on his face. He glances back to where the shadow had been, the memory of its presence still sending a shiver down his spine. "At first, I thought it was just a person, but the closer I got, the more I realized it was something else entirely." "Well, I did tell you it was dangerous, didn't I?" she says, sheathing her dagger with a graceful flick of her wrist. "But, yeah, shadow. A person would have been much nicer. I've been tracking this thing for weeks," she continues, glancing back at Jay, her eyes still sparkling with amusement. "These shadows feed on fear, slipping through towns unnoticed, creeping into places like this to grow stronger. But you," she points at Jay, still smirking, "you just strolled up and made it wonder if it was about to get offered a drink." "Uh-huh," Jay says, somewhat still in disbelief. She brushes dirt from her hands and steps toward Jay, her expression softening slightly. "To be honest, Jay, I wasn't sure how this was going to end." She pauses, tilting her head as her gaze lingers on him. Her tone shifts, more serious, until her facade cracks and she chuckles. "You faced down a shadow with nothing but a butter knife and a smile. Most people would have run screaming, but you..." She pauses, then lets out a chuckle, shaking her head. She crosses her arms and leans casually against one of the ancient pillars, a smirk curling at her lips. "So, what do you say? Fancy a drink? Or would you rather go chat with some more shadows?" Now, feeling the chill seep into his bones, Jay finds himself torn between the urge to seek warmth and the desire to see where the night leads. The first hints of dawn are creeping into the sky, casting a pale light over the ruins. He glances at Silra, offering a tentative smile. "Dawn's almost here," he says, rubbing his hands together against the cold. "How about we find a place to get a warm drink? I know a spot nearby, and on the way you can explain exactly what we just did back there." Silra notices the subtle shiver running through Jay as the cold of the night settles in. She looks up at the sky, the faint light of dawn beginning to creep over the horizon. Her expression softens as she nods in agreement. "A warm drink sounds perfect right about now," she says, pushing herself off the pillar and adjusting her cloak. As the two begin to walk back through the forest, the oppressive weight that had once clung to the air now feels lifted, though the lingering cold still bites at Jay's skin. Silra's pace is relaxed now, her guard down as the ruins slowly fade into the distance behind them. "You're probably wondering what we just stumbled into back there," she begins, her voice calm but edged with the weight of something more serious. "That shadow was more than just a random creature. It is tied to something—" She sighs, running a hand through her hair as the faint light of dawn illuminates her face. "This isn't exactly how I expected the night to go," she says quietly, almost to herself, before glancing at Jay with a more thoughtful expression. "I didn't plan on dragging anyone else into this mess, especially someone I just met." Jay smiles. "I take it you're not from around these parts?" Silra chuckles softly, her breath visible in the cold morning air as the village draws nearer. "No, not exactly," she replies, her tone light but carrying an edge of weariness. "I've been through here before, but I don't stay in one place for long." She kicks at a small stone on the path, watching it roll ahead before continuing. "Most places I go, I'm just passing through. There's always something pulling me forward. Those orb-light things are scattered all over the land." She glances at Jay, her eyes a little softer now, as if letting down her guard just a bit. "What about you? I take it you're a local then? Street sweeper by day, shadow whisperer by night." Jay chuckles, a bit sheepishly rubbing the back of his neck. "I'll admit I was a little out of my depth back there, but I'm glad you didn't decide to eat me. You know, people tell stories about beautiful succubus luring men away, never to be seen again." Silra stops mid-step and turns to Jay with a raised eyebrow. A sly grin spreads across her face as she crosses her arms, leaning slightly toward him. She lets out a laugh. "A succubus?" she repeats, her voice dripping with playful sarcasm. "Well, that's a new one." Shaking her head as she starts walking again, her tone more teasing now. "You thought I was going to lure you away and, what, feast on your soul?" She glances at Jay from the corner of her eye, her grin softening into something a bit more genuine. "But I'll take it as a compliment that you even considered it. I'm just an elf with a habit of getting into trouble, not, well, that." Jay grins. Good to know. Her gaze lifts to the horizon where the first hints of dawn are breaking through, bathing the village ahead in a soft glow. "Maybe we both got more out of this night than we expected." There's a brief silence before she adds with a smirk, "And hey, if I ever do turn out to be a succubus, you'll be the first to know." She winks and then gestures toward the village ahead. Jay pauses for a moment, thinking it over, before a determined smile crosses his face. "I'll take that risk," he mutters to himself, then hurries to catch up with Silra. Together they head toward the harbour, where the first hints of morning mingle with the rich, inviting aroma of freshly brewed coffee drifting through the air. He glances at her, a playful grin tugging at his lips. "Coffee?" he asks. "Coffee?" she repeats. She glances around, taking in the peaceful setting, and nods in approval. "Not a bad choice, Jay." She walks beside Jay as they move towards the stands, the steam from the brewing coffee mixing with the cool morning air. Silra inhales deeply, a contented look crossing her face as she glances at Jay with a hint of playful skepticism. She laughs softly, shaking her head. "If I didn't know better, I'd say you're trying to charm me with a bit of hospitality." She looks at Jay. Coffee after a shadow hunt. "Can't beat a coffee in the morning after a successful hunt," Jay replies. She leans on the counter of the coffee stand, ordering 2 cups before turning to Jay, her expression a little lighter now. The vendor hands over 2 steaming cups. Silra takes a sip, her eyes closing briefly in appreciation. Jay digs into his pocket, pulling out the few pennies he has, and counting them to pay for the coffee. A flicker of emotion crosses her face, understanding perhaps, or a hint of guilt for involving him in such an unexpected adventure. For a moment she remains silent, her eyes softening as she observes his small gesture. "Jay, you don't have to do that," she says gently, her voice carrying a sincerity he hasn't heard from her before. Before he can argue, she reaches into her pouch and pulls out a small silver coin, flipping it to the vendor with ease. "My treat," she adds, a faint smile touching her lips. "After all, you've done more than enough tonight, especially considering you had no idea what you were getting into." She grins, lifting her cup toward Jay in a small toast. "To surviving the night and to not being eaten by a succubus." Jay smiles. "To surviving the night, and we will see about the succubus." She gives Jay a small smile. As she takes another sip of her coffee, she leans against the counter, her eyes drifting toward the horizon where the sun is beginning to rise, casting the harbour in soft golden light. "Thanks, best cup of coffee I've ever had," Jay says with a grateful smile, savouring the warmth of the drink. They sit together by the harbour, watching the sun slowly rise over the water. The peaceful moment lingers. Silra takes another slow sip of her coffee, letting the warmth seep into her hands as she gazes out toward the rising sun, its light reflecting off the calm waters of the harbour. Jay, stop lazing around, you're supposed to be working!" A rather irritated man with a broom shouts, his tone sharp and impatient, echoing across the quiet docks. Silra looks over at the grumpy street sweeper, a bemused smile playing on her lips as she sips her coffee. The peaceful moment is abruptly interrupted, but she seems more entertained by it than anything else. She turns to Jay, eyebrow raised, as the other sweeper's voice grows louder. "Looks like someone's not a morning person," she teases, glancing at the approaching figure. "Do you get this kind of welcome every day, or is it just when you're caught sitting around with mysterious elves?" The grumpy sweeper gets closer, unimpressed with the sight of Jay relaxing at the harbour while the early morning work is waiting. His face is red with irritation as he waves his broom in Jay's direction. "Jay, you're supposed to be working, not lounging around like you've got nothing better to do." Silra leans back, her playful grin widening as she gives Jay a sidelong glance. "Guess your cover's blown. Should I distract him, or leave you to handle it?" There's a twinkle of mischief in her eyes as she watches the situation unfold. A pang of disappointment hits Jay as the morning pulls him back to reality. He wishes this night could last a little longer, but he knows how tough it is to hold down a job in this town, and the struggle to keep steady work has always been a challenge. Torn, he glances back at Silra, a hint of regret in his eyes. "I'm already over an hour late for my shift, but I've had such a great time with you," he admits, his voice softening. He hesitates for a moment before adding, "Do you think I'll see you again?" She glances sideways at Jay, studying him thoughtfully, as if weighing a decision in her mind. Her fingers drum lightly against the cup, a rare uncertainty flashing across her face. She takes a deep breath and then, with a small, almost shy smile, she turns to him. "Jay," she begins, her tone casual but carrying a hint of nervousness that she can't quite mask. "I was thinking, I've got a few more of these strange little jobs. Nothing like your usual night out, but—" She pauses, glancing down into her cup for a moment, then back at him, the vulnerability in her expression just barely hidden behind her playful demeanour. "But if you're interested, I could use the company. It's nice to have someone watching my back who knows how to keep things light." She gives him a sideways smile, attempting to sound casual, but the slight tension in her voice betrays her uncertainty. "So, what do you think?" Her eyes search his face, a little worried that he might turn her down, that she might have read his interest in their strange adventure wrong. She raises her cup, trying to keep her tone light, even as she waits for his answer. Jay, torn with conflict, says, I need my job." Silra's playful expression softens as she sees the conflict in his eyes. The weight of reality sinks back in, the fleeting magic of the night giving way to the harshness of everyday life. She watches Jay for a moment, her gaze thoughtful, and then offers a small, understanding smile. "Jay," she says quietly, setting her coffee cup down on the counter, "I get it. Life's not easy. You've got responsibilities." She pauses, her eyes searching his as if she's considering something more than just her next words. "As for seeing me again," she glances at the harbour, then back at him, her smile turning a bit wistful. "Who knows? I'm always on the move." She stands, taking a step closer to Jay and lowering her voice slightly as if sharing a secret. "You've got more in you than just sweeping streets, Jay. Tonight you showed that. Maybe one day you'll decide to see where that takes you." With that, she gives Jay a light punch on the arm, her smirk returning. "Until then, don't let that grumpy old sweeper give you too much trouble." Sil returns as if to walk away, but she pauses, looking back at Jay over her shoulder. Jay doesn't know what to say. He is lost for words. "Take care of yourself, Jay, and if fate has its way, we'll meet again." With a wink, she disappears into the early morning crowd, leaving Jay with the memory of an extraordinary night and the faint hope that this isn't the last time he will see her. The grumpy sweeper, still glaring at Jay, mutters, "Come on, Jay. The streets aren't going to sweep themselves." "Fuck off, Gerald," a stunned Jay says as he grabs the broom from him and gets to work. Gerald stands there for a moment with his mouth open, blinking in disbelief. He grumbles something under his breath, then shakes his head and storms off, muttering about lazy workers and unruly behaviour. Thank you for listening. I'm creating and sharing this story on my own, so your support genuinely means the world to me. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it and leave a review wherever you listen. Those small things really help support me. For updates, or if you'd like to read the story instead, visit silverwoodsaga.com. Thank you.